Welcome back to Root Causes, and welcome back to our repeat guest, Dr. Dustin Moody. We always love having you on because in so many ways you're the horse's mouth when it comes to PQC. I want to ask you, one of the things, so NIST, you guys, quite a while ago now, threw some deadlines out there. You threw out 2030 and 2035, 2030 for deprecation, 2035 for complete removal of RSA and ECC in favor of PQC algorithms. We've seen, as of recording time, just in the last month or so, 5 weeks, we've seen some quite important papers suggesting that the attack on PQC or the attack on traditional cryptographic algorithms might be considerably accelerated from what people had originally expected. We've also seen some very high-profile announcements, not only from Google, but also from Cloudflare, essentially throwing down the gauntlet, saying that 2029 really should be when we all migrate to PQC algorithms. In light of this change, and obviously these are things that have occurred since your original pronouncements, should we expect NIST to reevaluate its dates? Should we be looking in the future for something from you guys?
Yeah, of course. That's excellent questions, and those are some announcements and news that people have been seeing in the PQC community. These papers, the one by Google, the other by Oratomic and Caltech and Berkeley, they were the latest in kind of a series of papers we've had over the years that have lowered the resources needed to, attack ECC or RSA using a quantum computer. In one sense, that's not too unexpected. We expect research to advance and improve things, but these have also been results, that have moved the goalposts considerably, not just millimeters at a time, so to speak. So we do take these seriously. We look at them and make sure that we're paying attention to what they're saying. Our timeline, the 2035 is kind of the main timeline that National Security Memo 10 from the White House put out as the year the U.S. government was wanting to ensure that it was transitioned by as much as possible. NIST put out its timelines in accordance with that document. We have taken, consideration, thinking about the results, and at the moment, it won't be final until our document, which is with the nice government name of NIST 8547, the final version is published. Yes. Yeah. So our timeline was in the draft version, and the final version's due to come out pretty soon. We're just waiting for some possible changes from up above, but overall, I don't expect probably the 2035 year to change, and that's just because it is the date that we want everyone to transition everything by. That's not to say that we don't want people that can transition sooner to do so. So like Google and Cloudflare do a lot of their work in the cloud and in software, that is an area where you're able to migrate probably a little bit quicker. And so that's good. We want to encourage that. But there's places where it's going to be a little bit harder to migrate, like hardware, where they're still building the chips right now, putting in optimized PQC algorithms, and that's going to take a little bit of time. So we do look at it. Is it possible that we change it? It's possible. I kind of think the year 2035 is probably what will end up staying there. While what we might want to do is prioritize certain use cases and say, in these areas, you should absolutely be moving a little bit quicker.
Can I attempt to bring up those use cases, those topics, Dustin, at a high level? I think the chems were first, and I think that those are the exact players we saw, the hyperscalers, people who operate big CDNs. They were putting in chems now for a while, and it was great. That was nice to see that kind of activity. I tell my family and neighbors, I've got post-quantum cryptography in my pocket now with a lot of chems that are in a lot of consumer devices. It's great to see. But then, of course, eventually the signature algorithms have to come in. And to me, anything that is applying to harvest now, decrypt later, standard enterprise systems, trust now, forge later risks such as signing mechanisms. And then, of course, as you say, it's going to come down to the final set, which would be anything that's authentication based, and then of course hardware.
Hmm.
Would you change any of that order, or would you add any?
No, I think I largely agree with that, and that's what I think we've been seeing. Like you said, the work on the chems has gone quicker, and signatures is happening, but just not at the same rate there. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
That's great. So the way to think about 2029 then is perhaps, and I'm just going to offer this up just in terms of this episode because this is what we're bringing up, this 2029. I think when Google, Cloudflare, and the others bring up 2029, I think that they really are absolutely talking about chem and having it being 100% of their operation. Um, but then the DSA part of it probably really comes in at the 2030 mark. If you just want to think pragmatically about it, and then everything else slides into that post 2030 timeframe into 2035. I think that's the pragmatic way to look at it. And I've talked to people in the real world who work in the trenches, and that's how they're hoping it all kind of shapes up. The problem, and Tim, this is the one that we've seen. We've just brought up on this podcast the fact that we have seen some incredible research, and it's not just about RSA; it's about specifically curves on ECC. And if we end up with a snap deprecation or a fear that, oh my goodness, we have a situation with ECC, things could come sooner. So I think when people are listening to this episode about 2029, that might actually be what they're worried about, not just the pragmatic timeline of how things have to work. Chems first, DSA second. That's just the natural order of things. I think what people are worried about really is the fall of ECC. And how would NIST respond to that if something known were to pop up in research or a disclosure or something like that?
Yeah, that's a tough question. We've known since the very beginning, something could happen at any time that we would need to accelerate. Could have happened back in 2018 for all we knew. We monitor things carefully. If something came out, we would very much, change that timeline as quickly as we could. It's not just NIST. We do this in coordination with some of the other federal agencies that manage cryptography for the government. Um, in some sense, though, even if you do change the date, even if you were to say, let's push 2035 to 2030, in the real world, we want to give that urgency, but this transition is going to take some time, no matter what the timeline is. Just that's the reality of how cryptographic transitions work. And so we certainly want people to be motivated. If something came out, we'd try and motivate them even quicker, move the timeline up. But we know that it's going to be very, very complex and tricky, and it's going to take a while.
I want to say something, Tim, at the end of this podcast, which is a thanks to NIST and probably personally to you too as well, Dustin, which is nothing has done more for the messaging around PQC than NIST's drawing the lines in the sand around 2030 and 2035. That is something that we've seen no matter who I talk to. It's not about being spooked about a quantum computer existing. It's about the authority of NIST saying those two dates in that guidance document. And I'm really glad to hear that there's going to be an update coming soon. So this was my one chance to say thank you very much for that, because I think that was important for our entire industry.
Well, thank you for that nice remark. And NIST isn't the only organization out there doing the migration, and so we have seen partner countries and other standards organizations putting out timelines. To a large extent, they've agreed with the same timeline that the U.S. has gone with, but we need
Which
this
is good.
migration globally, so it's good that we're in sync.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Dustin Moody. This has been Root Causes.